is yes.
That is
Yes. All right, so everyone is here is my assumption. So Ellie was elected new VPFA, so congratulations to her. All right, so we are done with elections.
Just
So
very
go ahead
quickly,
and
Nate Blair, Vice
Go
President
ahead.
for Community Development, will be sending out the official results for representatives, presidential, and now vice presidential elections this afternoon or this evening, along with a confirmation letter from our advisor.
Thank
That's
you.
awesome. Thanks, Nate. I just want to say that the president who was elected, Dan Laffin, has joined today and he is observing and everything as well. So since he's on, I want to say congratulations to him, to Simon and Ellie. Congrats, all of you. Great team.
Congrats.
Congrats.
All right, so we are going to go ahead and move on to the budget. So I'm going to go ahead and pass this over to Shu. Shu, are you there?
Allie, how about, actually, do you want to project the budget to the screen or you want me to share the screen?
Either or, it doesn't matter. If you have it up already, because I don't have it up.
I have it
That'd be fine.
up.
But I can do it as well.
Can anyone see my screen then? So, to be very brief, so compared with last year, the most significant change we have is to increase the external funding for students, because we anticipate that many more students will either lose the fellowship or assistantship and need more support from alternative source. That's why we try to maintain the graduate student. We try to increase the grant for graduate students and also establish now the food security funds. Another thing is that because that even by this week, I haven't heard back from the university about the official number or the official estimate of the student fee that they expected to collect for the next academic year. So we are told that we use the past year's number as a starting point for the budget. And also that we know for sure that the university will probably implement this furlough plan. So it is the question just what's the percentage of cut they want to implement it. But the graduate assistant, which I think include the president and vice presidents, will not be affected. But university also expected a decline in enrollment, especially international students. So because the GSG is funded by the student activity fee, given the possible decline in the student activity fee, we will also provide a fourth scenario, which one is just we expect no change, which is highly unlikely. And the second is 10%, and third is 15%, and fourth is 20%. And you can just see, I think, the change. Mainly that the change we made is that for the food, if in the 15 or 20%,
it's difficult for people to see it the way it is.
Yeah.
Can you turn off the paragraph view? All the symbols. It's the button where it says paragraph.
Is it here or
in the top bar?
Top bars.
No, right? Do you see the word where it says review? Go look where the word review go down.
Go down.
No,
Sorry.
Go click
on
home.
with
Click
All the way
home.
on the left, click on home.
home.
Now point to the word review and move your mouse down. Don't click it. There, not there. Right?
It looks like a black backwards P. If you go down from the review button,
It's a
about
gray
an inch
square.
on the top.
The
Gray
gray
square.
square.
Actually,
It's not in the text of the document. It is on the top bar below where the word review is.
I think I just give
Yeah.
Yehuda the control. So
Just click
Oh.
on that. Yeah. Click.
if you put here,
There. Yep. That fixed it.
okay, so then thank you. So the big change you see is here. In the dramatic, in all the scenario will involve some cuts. We will eliminate the expenditure on food and room reservations. This is the second significant change. And the third one is about, I think the third one just that reduce the expenditures we spend on grad pop. Because we expect that even in the first semester, bidding by the social distance rule will be still encouraged. So grad pop will definitely probably will not be held in the first semester. So, but still we can find some online event, but the amount of money we need to spend on that will be much less than what we spend on a grad pub, because grad pub usually that we spend most of the money on food and room reservations. So that's why we kind of cut this part as well. So, but still that we mainly that keep the expenditure on staffing unchanged. So I think that's just mainly, and also the third significant change is just the significant amount of money for the discretional funds. So because that, I think we need to be humble that we cannot anticipate all the change in the next academic or fiscal year. So we don't want to tie our hands. So compare with just the past fiscal year, there's only like $192 for discretional funding. We dramatically increased the discretional fundings. So that's, I think, is the three significant change. Increase the amount to support students in the form of food security funds for activity outside classrooms, and also for the graduate student grants to support their research and professional developments. And the second is just to eliminate this or to remove the expenditure on food and room reservation for the assembly meeting. And the third one is the increase the amount for discretional spending. Yeah, that's my summary of the change in the proposed budgets. I think after that percent or so the GLL budgets, we can, or do you want to ask a question now?
Let's ask a few questions now. I believe Yehuda raised his hand before me.
I see the note taker line was zeroed out.
Yes.
Sorry,
Because
sorry you said that. So what's happening with note taking?
The rationale is that if we all use Zoom, then there will be no need for hiring a note taker.
Except, so the problem is that as we sort of went through earlier, minutes aren't the same as a transcript. So someone has to prepare minutes of the meeting. And that was the point of the note taker.
Yeah, so I think that's note taker take. Last year we spent like $700 on the note taker, right? Because if we feel there's a need for the note taker, we can definitely, in this fourth semester, we can just spend the discretion of funding on the note taking.
First off, I would actually second Yehuda's comment. I don't think we can zero that out, especially with our push to have more detailed notes. And I don't know the quality of the Zoom transcripts, but I imagine that they are not perfect, shall we say. Also, I don't believe we can afford to zero out the budget for room rental. I definitely say we can axe the food, that's for sure. But given the Constitution calls for us to meet in person if possible, and the fact that by the time the spring rolls around, we could very well be able to meet in person again, I think it's a little bit overly generous to assume that we will not have to do any sort of room rental at any point of the year. I mean, I suppose we could just have that also be pulled from the discretionary fund, but I don't want us to run out of discretionary funds only to then have to try to figure out how we can scramble to pay for a room rental.
Yeah, I think this point well taken. So what we can do is to allocate $2,000 from the EFR to the food to the room reservations, and also yeah, so we can definitely allocate that $2,000 from the EFR to the room reservations, because basically we still trying to maintain the same amount of EFR, and I think this amount is kind of flexible. So for the note taker, so I guess it depends on. So do we want to pass a budget with a dedicated amount for the note taker, or we want to use discretion of funding in the four to see whether we need to hire professional note takers?
I really hate to beat a dead horse here, but I think before we fund a note taker, we need to have very clear expectations about what that person's doing. Are they recording a transcript and then transcribing it, or are they doing minutes? Because I think, as it was mentioned, that it was $70 a meeting, and it could take an hour if they're minutes, or it could take 7 hours if it's a transcript. It just needs to be discussed.
Yeah, so I guess then, given the amount of money we spend on note taker, which is, I think it's less than $1,000, which is, I think, the discretion fund can more than cover. So how about that we leave it for the next executive team and the next assembly to decide whether they want a note taker? And because I think Allison has a point that if we want to hire a note taker again, then we need to clarify his or her job responsibilities. So it might take us too much time to finish the discussion today. So, but yes, so but does anyone want to make a recommendation or propose amendment just to shift by $2,000 from the event fund and request to the room reservations?
I would propose moving because it currently, correct me if I'm wrong, it's 4,000 is what we spent this past year.
Yes.
So yeah, 2,000 should be enough. We could even go with 1,500 because I don't think we're probably going to get back right away. And $500 as well within the discretionary if we end up needing to fudge it by a bit more. So I say we move just $1,500. That would be my proposed amendment.
Seconded.
Okay, so let's.
Or actually, the room is only 500, so I suppose we could just move the room budget of 500 and leave off the food. That would actually be a better option, in my opinion. So I would like to instead propose 500.
500.
Seconded.
And then furthermore, I re-raised my hand because I had one other point of information. Are we voting on a specific budget of these 4 options, or are we voting on this is what the 4 options look like, and whatever happens with the fees, we will automatically implement the relevant budget?
I think that we are voting on this is the 4 scenario would look like, and whatever happened to the fee, then we will at least use this as a starting point.
Okay, thank you.
Can I quickly say my point? I have to go. Is it okay?
Go ahead, Q.
Yeah, I just want to say that the Zoom transcript is actually very good. They've done a great job with that. The other thing is that I think if we want this person for handling the minutes, I think we have 10 meetings, each would take an hour, let's say 2 hours to do that. So that would be, I think with minimum wage of Maryland, that would be around $300. So I wouldn't go more than that, but yeah, just want to add.
You think this is a minimum wage job?
I don't know. I actually think
we're not allowed to pay more than that under previous bylaws changes.
Then why was it 700? That's why.
But that was for the whole transcript, and then it was the job that's you've done. It's so different than what we're saying right now.
Oh, that's helpful. Okay, so you're saying just for the minutes?
Yes, just talking about the minutes. I'm not.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
$700 at $15 an hour is not that much money for sitting through all the meetings, even though if you're not an elected member and taking minutes.
Okay.
Ashley, can I go ahead and speak?
Yes, so I see Emmanuel's hand is up.
Okay, thank you. I also wanted to make some comment about that issue of the note taker, and I've posted my first question in the chat. Traditionally, the way we conduct our meetings is when we open up, we propose and second the meetings, but the minutes of the previous meeting once they have been sent to us. Are we trying to say that we shall be sending transcripts to members so that during the meeting they propose and second transcripts? And the next thing also, I think we cannot substitute transcripts for the real minutes, because we need something to file and maybe probably in the future refer to when we are having an event like the way Alison said. It is just very hard for us to, maybe if we are making a case maybe to the university senate or the university council and so on, and they want to make a reference to minutes, and you take to them a transcript of an entire assembly, I think it is not just right. We need to have a note taker and either have both the Zoom transcript and also the physical minutes. And also again, what if COVID is not going to be there forever? We will resume back to campus and we will not be doing meetings on Zoom and so on. Yeah, so I feel like striking away the note taker and leaving the problem to the incoming exec is creating a problem for them. Thank you.
All right, so I'm seeing Yehuda's hand is up. Oh, you're muted, Yehuda. Sorry,
I was going to motion to move 5 $500 from EFR to note taker.
I'll second.
All right, Viviana's hand is up.
Sure, yeah, I think that may be solving our problem. I was just going to ask, it seems like we maybe do need to continue to have a nuanced conversation about this, perhaps at a future date. So as long as we designate enough money to cover what we might possibly need, assuming that that's, it's still flexible later on. So yes, I agree with the 500 and I suggest that we move on to the next thing.
Okay, so we have a motion for moving 500. We have a second. Are there any objections? Seeing none, the motion is agreed to.
Are there any other comments or questions regarding the budget, or can we proceed to vote on the budget as a whole?
Yeah, I can't raise my hand because I'm a co-host. So I'm just going to throw out there that people should keep in mind that the budget can be amended throughout the year. So there's a lot of things here that, we don't know if we need rooms and things like that. We'll be able to deal with that as the year goes on. I think the Finance Committee has done a wonderful job of creating us a lot of different ways that we can deal with this, given different numbers that might show up. But don't forget that we have the ability to sort of change this if the situation changes, as well as it surely will.
Yeah. So if it's, I think then. Zach will go through the GRL budget now. So Zach, do you want to share your screen, or you want me to project?
Sure, I can share it on mine.
Okay.
First of all, we're setting this up. Just introduce myself. My name is Zach Raimundi. I'm the director of GLAO. I know there's some new people here who I haven't met before. GLAO provides sort of a wide range of legal services that are, people can meet with me. We also provide immigration appointments for our international students, and we provide student advocate appointments for individuals who are charged by the university with violating the university student code of conduct or the code of academic integrity. I think that Ashley sent out our annual report, so if hopefully, to speed things up, I won't get into too much detail because I know you guys still have stuff on your calendar. This is a busy end of year meeting. And so this is sort of just the budgetary proposal. You can see from our last year that things are, we're trying to maintain the status quo in the first no reduction budget. We know that's probably very unlikely. And so we similarly provided multiple scenarios and where the cuts would take place. Speaking to Annie and Shu, and sort of knowing how things evolved over the past year, that there was sort of a larger need for specialized legal services. The situation at Seven Springs and a few others that really affected a large portion of graduate students. And then we wanted to make it a priority to put additional funding for that sort of situation, because there are certain limitations that present themselves to me as, I'm not allowed to represent individuals. And so we have allocated approximately $4,500 to $5,000 to that, for whether it is an expansion of what is needed for our international students, given that that is literally changing every day, every week, or whether there are sort of more widespread issues that are popping up that are affecting a number of graduate students. Maybe it's evictions once the moratorium is lifted or something like that, that we could try to get some more specialized advice for a large number of students to assist them. if there are cuts, we provide our weekly workshops, and so we are already factoring in, even in the status quo budget, reductions in that. It's extremely unlikely that we're going to do any in-person workshops in the fall, and so we'll figure out whether that's feasible in the spring, whether it's not. It's sort of been, we've gotten a good response from we've been holding some additional workshops since we did merge online and transition online. And so we're probably going to be integrating that in the future anyway, even for our situations when we are holding them in person. But that does reduce food budget, room rentals, that sort of thing. There's also going to be a number of savings for marketing items that we usually give out at orientations that are now going to all be done online and that sort of thing to help spread the word for our services. But most of the other things you can see that our operating expenses are pretty similar, in the ideal. There are some reductions to office supplies and office equipment that is sort of based on if we're not going to be there, we're going to continue to provide virtual services, at least for the time being. And so maybe there's less paper that we need to purchase and less toner and that sort of stuff. So hopefully there'll be some savings there. And as you can see, a large portion of our budget is devoted to salaries and benefits, which are kind of, there's not much you can do about that because it is sort of Debbie and myself are state employees, and it's just really heavily regulated. And at the end of the day, we would reduce hours for our office assistant, and then similarly our graduate student advocates needed, we could reduce the hours. We can't eliminate the positions because they're required for the Office of Student Conduct process. I, as an attorney, am not allowed to be a representative. You have to be represented by another student. And so we think that it is necessary to provide that. But we could reduce the hours if absolutely mandatory. It's just sort of what we would have to do. We were lucky that for those of you who were involved in the budget process last year, that we did absorb, there was the addition of health benefits for our coordinator position that was sort of because the line had been there for 3 years and it was transitioning. And it turned out not to cost as much as we were expecting and budgeting for, because the university switched their benefit accounting system. And so it used to be based on actual projections for the individuals in each unit. And they changed over to a university-wide pool where every employee pays, every office or department pays a certain percentage of each employee's salary. And then what the actuals are, like myself, I'm on a family plan, so I have one of the more expensive plans, but I pay the same, my allocations for the budget are the same 35.4%. Luckily, we are not in athletics where coaches are getting paid hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars, and now they're paying a lot towards the benefit pool that they weren't having to pay before. But luckily, that helps subsidize us and saves us money. So there was about $5,000-ish savings there, which is going to be helpful depending on how much the cuts are going to be. And you can see a lot of that money was sort of transferred to the specialized legal services. And so, but we still even had a slight reduction based on what our expected status quo is. And as you can see, if we're going to do a 10% reduction, we just wouldn't rehire the office assistant position. If we're going to be doing more than that, we would cut back the hours here of the student advocates, and then similarly cut all of our food budgeting out and all of that. And then even if say there's only a 10% reduction, which is this section here, if we're online or remote, or even in the spring not allowed to have sort of in-person workshops, then that money would just come out. That money would just reduce our spend down our spend down expenditures. And so we do have a spend down that we have additional money that is sort of supplements, because there was a period, there used to be a third employee that I guess wasn't rehired for a number of years before I was here. And so there was money put into a spend down fund that we were trying to look for ways to spend, and now is going to be hopefully a way to maintain services without major cuts, because we can sort of spend from that. And then the same as what Shu said, the big question is what student fees are going to be. We really have no idea how much of a reduction it's going to be. I did see an email yesterday that they're not reducing they're not reducing student fees specifically for us. You know, and there are some fees. I think the athletic fee or rec well fee might be getting a reduction, but they're not reducing the fee. So it really is going to be what's enrollment. And there are going to be a number of visa issues that are pushing back enrollment. And so there's a chance that some students, international students, may defer to January for programs. And so we might lose out on one semester fees, or even if people are deferring a full year, then there could be significant reductions in student fee collection, which is sort of our progression down here. And I know that SHU, originally we had a 25% reduction in one of our columns, and I think SHU changed that upward. And so I think he has a little bit more information on that with his university-wide finance committee. So hopefully that's a good sign. But certainly any questions that people have about the budget or sort of what our services or programs are planning to be, certainly can answer any questions.
Thank you, Zach. Can you scroll down to the goal you set up for GIO in the next year?
For which portion?
Scroll down. So because we also add appendix or some highlighting some of the goal that GIO set up for the next years. Because I think that
the goals, yeah. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So one thing about so the bylaw required the GSG Assembly to have like 2 performance review of GIO. So, but the current requirements is kind of conflict with the state policy because the HR review is kind of considered confidential. So I think we are still figuring out how we can best conduct the performance review while still complying with the state policy. So then I think that we try now then to present that highlight of GIO goal for the next year as appendix. So to provide some criterion the future assembly can use when we conduct the performance reviews. So then 2 things I think we want to highlight is that first is just that we want, Zach and we agree that we want to expand the pro bono networks of lawyers that can help students because as a GIO it's just as an office, right? So Zach has a very, despite his best intentions, he has a limited legal knowledge. And so, but if he can expand the network, right, of lawyer who's willing to help students, then I guess that we can kind of leverage the very limited resources by GIO. And the next is just that to expand even the network of the referral system so that a student can get a quality lawyer and a relatively low cost. So I think that's the 2 goals that we set out for the service, or 2 new goals for the service that hopefully can help students. Of course, that the special legal service is also our attempt to bring more outside helps in areas that affect students the most, but because of our expertise constraint, that we cannot offer more helps. So I think is the 2 areas that we want to highlight, and also we're definitely open to feedback at how you think that we can better serve students, and also how we should conduct the performance review, the 2 performance review in the next fiscal years.
Yeah, and I think just to touch briefly on that, if you saw my responses to the questions that were submitted, that was one of the main things, is that the bylaw specifically referenced a PRD, which is the part of my individual employment. And so those are by university policy confidential, as SHU indicated. And so I think it makes total sense to, really just rework that, take out the PRD references and just make it essentially like, at the November or December assembly, GLAO will provide a semester update, and then similarly, it could happen in whatever dates work for you guys, to sort of just put in 2 in the year, and then maybe this one at the end could similarly be here for the budget. But I think that makes perfect sense, and just sort of laying out those expectations and allow more feedback throughout the year from you guys about what you're hearing amongst your colleagues and within your communities.
Can I say something?
Mhm.
So in terms of expanding like attorneys and more help, I know some nonprofit community organizations in Maryland, like Casa de Maryland, who sometimes provide attorney help or like other resources for like a small fee or sometimes for free. So I can, if the university allows it and it goes in the bylaws, I can reach out to them and connect them and see how they can also help.
Yeah, that's great. And we have a referral list for nonprofit organizations. One problem is most nonprofit organizations receive federal funding, and federal grant funding restricts who they can represent and prevents them from representing international students because they're non-citizens. It's nonsense, but it's just how it works. And so a lot of and we see about 2/3 international students for our the clients that I speak to, the students that I speak to. And so a lot of times there's that limitation, which is why I think making a priority to find individuals that are willing to partner with us to provide pro bono or low bono, reduced cost legal services is great. But I know like Casa de Maryland is a great organization that provides those services for so many people, both in housing and then sort of immigration related as well. And so it's if you have a connection, that'd be great. It would be great to sort of as many connections as we can make to any organization that can help even one person of our graduate student population is definitely worthwhile.
So I'm also seeing Alex hand up and then Misty.
Sure. So I have actually 2 points that I would like to bring up regarding your current budget, specifically the budget for food services, and then secondly, the budget for the office assistant. Given that we're going to be continuing to work from home for the foreseeable future, and including in the fall, I don't quite see why we really need an office assistant role, even if because I noticed that is cut in some of the 10%, 15%, 20% reduction budget. I'm just wondering why that's still there in the no reduction budget. And then secondly, with regards to the food services, I have a similar question of, we know that generally the spread of COVID comes more through when people are not wearing masks and whenever there's food being offered, you kind of can't wear a mask while eating. And so to me, that doesn't make sense to have on the item at all on any of these things. And then especially given how that is a substantial line item, I mean, even if that is coming from the spend down and would only be used in the back half of the year or what have you, to me, it doesn't seem as core to the mission of serving graduate students. Whether there's food or not at a workshop doesn't make it so that there is more or less information being shared at said workshop. And so to me, that doesn't seem like nearly as good a use of funds as, say, continuing to expand the access to outside lawyers or other purposes. And similarly as well, the funds dedicated towards the marketing promotional items, again, not quite sure why we still have $750 funded towards that when there aren't going to be, as you said, in-person orientations to provide the free things out. So those are just 3 items that I have some concerns about.
Sure, yeah, and I think those are perfectly valid concerns. And I think that the status quo budget was meant to sort of maintain the status quo as much as possible, in a sense that next year it could also be a comparison tool to show that there's not just huge drastic changes from everything, that this was one version, but there were changes. And so an office assistant is certainly much more useful when we are on campus and when we have a number of walk-ins and that sort of thing. That probably won't be occurring when we're doing things virtually. And so I think that, and well, also there's a hiring freeze. And so I think right now there's a very, very low to no chance that that's actually going to be hired. Maybe that's something that is hired next spring if everything's fully operational, which again, I don't know how long this is going to take, and it probably won't be fully operational at all during this whole school year. The food and workshops, I think, was a little bit aspirational. We do receive really good turnout for the workshops, and as much as the information doesn't change, I think a lot of people do show up because of the food. And even if they're showing up and saying, I'm going to this as, a chance to say, I'm here for my, this is about how to get a green card, but then I'm also learning about other services because we have the ability to pitch them and explain everything else we do. It just helps get our name out there. And at the end of the day, we're never going to be able to reach everybody at orientations. Even if we do, they're never going to remember us. And so marketing does have a usefulness. And promotional items is mainly about that as well. So it's like usually we buy pens that we hand out to people who come. And similarly, this in the fall of last year, we had cell phone card holders. That is something our student advocates indicated is something other people would be interested in. And it's really just about letting everybody know about our services because it's a large campus. They get way too many emails about so many programs. They're trying to compete with that without some sort of incentive, I think is sometimes difficult. But I don't know who here has maybe you do have much more marketing expertise than us and realize that those items are not as useful. So yeah, I certainly would take any other comments on that or anybody with more insight.
All right, so Misty's hand is up.
Hi, I'm Misty. I'm actually a new rep from the communication department, but I think I'm allowed to speak, right? I just can't vote. I think it's right.
That is correct.
Okay, great. So kind of building on Alex's point, I just wanted to add that I think it's important that we don't cut the budget for the graduate student advocates, especially given that those are graduate students that I think us as a body are continually advocating for, aren't getting paid fairly and do important work for the campus. And for that to be one of the first thing that gets cut in lieu of marketing or some other items that might have more wiggle room seems, I know, sad for those graduate students that we already know are having to make do on little money. So if there's a way to reallocate to make sure that those salaries also aren't cut in the proposed budget cuts, I think that would be really awesome.
Yeah, I think that, and so there is a small cut in, if we're looking at the this right here, if we're talking about a 10% reduction, and that to be honest, that usually happens anyway because we have two student advocates, and one of them, in theory, we can hire them for sort of the whole year. But usually one of them has a fellowship or something else in the summer, or one of them doesn't work over January break or something. And so those savings, the only reason I made that reduction is because they usually happen anyway as savings. And so it certainly wasn't projected to reduce hours. And I agree with you. If my mission, our mission as GLAO is to serve the graduate student community, we certainly don't want to take away and like be a disservice to our own employees. And so we do prioritize them. And we did petition this summer. One of our student advocates got a fellowship, but we did petition, even though we were told that students wouldn't be able to work over the summer for us. We did petition and get a special exemption for our other student advocate to work over the summer. And so I agree and think that is, makes a lot of sense. And if the situation is that this one here in the 10%, we want to sort of take 2,000, 2,500 away from food right now to put there, I think that makes perfect sense.
All right, Alex, hand is up.
Yeah, I was going to propose zeroing out the food services budget. So yeah, that would be my recommendation. And then I suppose we can keep the marketing items in the 10% reduction, but I also agree that that should definitely be one of the things that gets dropped in quickly in case of need of sharper budgets. I was also just curious as well, Zach. I've been reading some online about how the state of Maryland may actually be clawing back the COLAs, may not actually be issuing any sort of cost of living increases for this coming year, in part due to the unprecedented hits to the state budget. If those COLAs are indeed not being used, that aren't being mandated, then would the proposed budgets come down accordingly?
Of course, yeah. So everything that deals with our salary or our benefits, we follow whatever the state does. And so we're not asking for any sort of pay increase if the state doesn't implement the COLA. We're not asking for, like, if the state or university implements a furlough, we're not asking, we're not going to be paid for that, because we as state employees have to follow that. And so that it certainly would be reduced by any canceling out of the COLA, which as if you have been following, was originally projected 2.5%. They have adjusted now to 1%. But I honestly think it probably will be zeroed out. And so I'm using the guidance that I've been provided. And so they haven't put it in writing yet that they're going to zero it out, but I agree they probably will. And so when that happens, it would just reduce our spend down expenditure. And so it wouldn't be implemented in any way.
So I have a motion to amend the budget to zero out food services. And I know we did that as well for our own personal budget. And I believe that, and so I think those are the two issues at debate for today. And though Allison, I noticed in the comments, did bring up a point about removing food services from everyone in the budget across the board, I do think that's a good idea. Just as something to keep in mind, is that is an issue outside of our current discussion, but something that I would support. And I am perfectly fine with Misty's suggestion that that be allocated instead towards making sure that the graduate student advocates are properly taken care of. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to zero out food services and then use those funds to ensure payment for graduate student advocates. Are there any objections? Going once, going twice. Seeing none, the motion is agreed to. Are there any other parts of the budget that people would like to ask about, think about, talk about? In that case, I guess we would be looking for a motion to approve the budget as written.
Second. Motion to approve the budget.
Second.
Hear the motion and a second. This is the budget, so we should probably vote on it rather than just going with unanimous consent so that we have a recorded vote. That seems important enough to do that. So in the participants tab, if you believe that this budget is good and should be the budget that we begin with for the next year, vote yes. If you do not think so, vote no. I'll leave the voting open for 1 minute. 10 seconds remain to vote. Time for voting has expired, and in a nail biter, the yeas are 20, the nays are 0, and there are no abstentions. The budget is agreed to.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we just need to find out where it went.
All right. We'll thank our presenters, Zhu and Zach. Thanks for giving
Thank
us
you,
the
everyone.
lowdown on the money. And we look forward to working with you next year.
Hopefully I'll see you before, but it's good to see everybody and take care of you're all healthy and safe.
Okay. That leaves us next with the agenda. GSG A39R06, a resolution calling for improvements to the UMD Institutional Review Board. Ashley, can you put that up for us, please?
And as a reminder, if you, now the vote is closed, please close out the yeses.
Yes.
I mean, I would certainly support you voting in favor of this resolution. So if you want to leave them up, feel free. But
I can actually clear everyone's, so it is so ordered. Okay, do we have, is the sponsor of this legislation in the room?
That would be me.
All right, then Mr. Dennis, if you would like to introduce the legislation, please.
Hello, everyone. I'm Alec Dennis, Business and Management. Annie is also a co-sponsor of this particular resolution. Basically, what it is for any sort of research involving human or animal subjects, there is a university, basically organization, the Institutional Review Board, that has to approve the research, to basically make sure that it is being conducted in accordance with all standards of governmental policy. So to make sure it's humane, that there is informed consent provided to subjects. Basically, it serves a rather important role in compliance and making sure that all research is done in a good manner. The problem is it can oftentimes bog down attempts at actually conducting research. They can be very, very slow to respond. They can run in, oftentimes get very caught up in minutia and actually object. I personally have had problems where I have had language that they will sometimes make suggestions of you need to change the phrasing for the for your study, your procedures this way or that way, where I make a change and then a round or two later, they actually object to the language that I directly copied from their statement. So they can be very inconsistent and also have problems where language that has been directly copied and from language that has previously been approved is suddenly found to be unacceptable. So it makes it just very hard to do efficient research, and especially when other institutions have made this process much easier and simpler. I have only personal awareness of inside information from my undergraduate school, Indiana University, but they committed to a really fast turnaround with responses within 48 hours. If they find an issue with something that you wrote, they will actually provide you with the text of this is what it should say instead. And if you accept the text, then everything is approved. They basically made it a conscious mission to have the IRB support the researchers rather than acting more as an oppositional role. And so what I'm basically saying as part of this resolution is, can we try to fix this and make it in a way that we can both support researchers and support the objectives of the IRB process? And so it's calling on the university to try to do this better. Open to any questions regarding this, regarding IRBs and KBs. I know a lot of you guys might not be as familiar with it as an organization. Open to any comments.
All right, so we will open debate on GSG A39R06. Anyone seek to be recognized? Mr. Katz.
So I think I was also a sponsor of this resolution. I've dealt with the IRB and I've had issues with consistency. I have not had the same severity of issues that Alec has seen, but we've definitely seen consistency problems where, if you submit 4 different applications, 3 of them might be done in 2 days, and then one of them you don't hear anything about for more than a month, even though it's substantially the same and shouldn't have taken more than 2 days. I can't speak to everything in this resolution, but there's definitely things that could be improved about the IRB.
Anyone else? Comments, questions, concerns? If not, then I'll ask for a motion to vote.
Motion to vote on the resolution under consideration.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
The motion has been heard and seconded. Are there any objections? Seeing none, the resolution is agreed to.
Thank you.
Which means we will now move on to the next resolution, GSG A39R07. Do we have a sponsor?
Hi, this is Shakia, Vice President, Diversity Inclusion. So Annie and I actually worked on this, and I can talk about it a little bit more. So this resolution is essentially acknowledging the different difficulties that the COVID-19 crisis has presented, particularly for people who are on a timeline to completion, and how that might have been disrupted because people can't, conduct their research or be on campus. So we are actually calling for the university to put into place certain policies that will, one, increase transparency for students, explain to them how their things might be impacted by this crisis, and also to grant extensions for advancement to candidacy for students that that applies to. And then finally, we're calling for the university to extend assistantships by 1 year for the students that will need it, and to put in place a mandate that departments cannot directly cancel or refuse to renew student assistantships who might need it extended because of the COVID crisis.
All right, thank you for that. I'll look for any comments or concerns after opening debate on GSG A39R07. Shocking that no one wants to speak against the university being more flexible with graduate students. Do I have a motion to vote?
Motion to vote.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any objections? Seeing none, the resolution is agreed to. Which means we will now move on to GSG A39R08. Resolution calling for waivers for out-of-state tuition and differential tuition during the COVID-19 pandemic for graduate students. Do we have an author present, author or sponsor?
Hello, this is Shakia, VPDI again. I believe the other exec members left, so I can present this. So similar to the last resolution, this resolution is also trying to get at some of the impacts of the COVID crisis on graduate students. Particularly, we are looking for the university to give out waivers that will make up for out-of-state tuition for grad students who are not able to fulfill their assistantships because they cannot be on campus. Usually when you have an assistantship, you're automatically considered an in-state student, so they get that in-state tuition rate, but students who might not be able to do their assistantships would therefore be classified again as out-of-state, which would impact them financially. So we're looking for the university to mitigate that. And then we're also looking for the university to make accommodations for international students who obviously might not be able to, who actually cannot complete their assistantships because they're not in the country, and make some accommodations to cover that tuition remission that they would have had. And then finally, we're also calling for the university to put in place a tuition-free policy for the duration of the COVID-19 pandemic, just so that our tuition is not going up while we're trying to deal with all of this.
All right, thank you for that summary. I'll now open debate on GSG A39 R08. In a surprise move, our favorite fiscal hawk, Mr. Alec Dennis.
Just one point of clarification that I'd like to request, specifically the point regarding the freeze of tuition. I believe the university has actually come out and already said that they are freezing tuition for the duration of the COVID crisis, and so I would move that we strike the first therefore, simply because it's no longer relevant. I mean, if we want to, we can still include that language, or in which case we should say instead that we support the university's move to do this, because as it is written, it is no longer quite accurate.
Okay, so we have a motion to amend GSG A39 R08 by striking the third whereas clause. Says the
No.
university.
Yeah, it's striking the third whereas clause, and then also it would be I believe the first therefore specifically is just calling for the tuition.
The third whereas and the first therefore on the basis that they have already happened, so it's hard to call for them to do it more. Do I have a second?
Seconded.
Are there any objections? Seeing none, the amendment is agreed to.
Oh, and furthermore, that should the second therefore should now be reworded to be therefore be it resolved that, because we would no longer need the word further.
Sure. Are there any objections to that? Seeing none, we're all good. Any other comments on R08? Seeing none, I'll look for a motion to vote on R08 as amended. I'm pretty sure Alec just said motion to vote
for
while
R08.
muted.
Yeah, that was me, my bad. But yes, motion to vote on.
Do I have
it
a
as
second?
Second.
All right. The hearing a motion and a second. Are there any objections? Seeing none, R08 is also agreed to and passed. I wish all of our resolutions went as smoothly as those did. At this point, we have set aside 10 minutes for representative forum, which means that if there are any remaining issues that you wish to bring up before the end of the meeting, you can do so now. Go ahead with a hand raise if you would like to. Also remember, of course, this being our last meeting, if you have particular issues, I am sure that the members of the new executive committee would be happy to take your questions as we move into new leadership roles, but also we can answer them now. First, I see Allison.
Hi, I wanted to follow up with what I mentioned to Alec, and then I messaged it to Ali. I think that the financial committee should move to take all food funding out of budgets and events for the next school year to be consistent and across the board with our own budgets and what we just asked Graduate Student Legal Aid to do. That's my idea.
Okay, so you're saying for event funding requests that come in the next year, we should not allow them to pay for food because.
And strike it from all future budgets that we look at.
Okay. Yeah, that'll have to be something we do when those budgets come up if they have food in them, but the point is well taken. Emmanuel.
So thank you, Simon. I just want to appreciate all of you for having worked with you for this academic year. It has been a moment of learning and also networking with all of you. And I think I want to wish our new IEP representative, Fatma Ali, very well as she steps in this role. One thing that I wanted to raise is, I know, as most of you may know, currently I'm serving on the Senate Executive Committee, and there are some opportunities for graduate students that will come up. And I believe that the representatives remain to be the best contact person that can reach out to graduate students. So whenever we send out those opportunities, either to the GSG email or even to the executive email, kindly just be responsive so that we make sure that many graduate students are participating in many ways as possible. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Mr. Katz.
So if people can stomach taking a little more time, I wanted to see if there's interest in going into an executive session to review GSGA 37 R06, because it's been a year since we talked about it. This is a resolution that was discussed previously and passed an executive session, and we have to be in executive session to talk about it. So I don't know if people are willing to do that. And if so, if there are enough people who are willing to stick around, I'd like to move to executive session.
So the one thing I'll say is that a lot of the people who are still here are not yet technically representatives. We have a lot of new people, which thank you, new people, for bearing with us through this very long meeting. I promise you not all of the meetings are this long. We had one last meeting to do all of these things, so we had to do them all at once. So thank you for that. But if you want to motion to move to executive session and extend the meeting, I mean, we can put it to a vote, and then if people are willing to stay, then they're willing to stay.
We have an hour and 12 minutes left in our previously extended time.
That is true. That is true.
What I would, if I may propose this, let us open the floor to any other remaining non-executive session questions that might be brought up in the forum. And then if there are no other questions, then those of us who are curious can certainly continue to attend for the executive session. But that way there's none of this like awkward sign in, sign out, that sort of thing.
Right. Well, to be fully transparent, I'd like to, in this executive session, raise the possibility of releasing the resolution publicly.
Ah, okay.
Okay. So we'll take Alex's suggestion and see if there are other things that people would like to chat about first. Misty.
Hi, it's Misty again, new. So I'm obviously new, and so I don't know fully how everything works, but something that it's been on my mind that's very pressing is that the graduate school just recently kind of issued a new statement about the status of international graduate students and their assistantships. And it seems that that's something very important that this body should think about. Again, being new, I don't know how we think about or address it, but even in my own attempts to try to get clarity about why the position changed and what's the reasoning behind the change, I've received very odd responses and non-responses. And I know I'm here to try to advocate for other graduate students. And so I think it's really important, and I don't know what to best do about it, but just wanted to kind of bring that up.
Yes, definitely an issue that we will be dealing with going forward. Part of the reasons for the change are changes in federal law and changes in state law that are sort of constantly in flux. But yes, we will definitely be monitoring that and seeing what it is we can do about it.
And if I just may add, about the law thing, I explicitly tried to get specific explanation about the legal reasoning and was shut down in a very interesting manner, because right now, from what I can tell, federal laws are just kind of open-ended. And so it seems as though University of Maryland has made a very self-serving decision that isn't necessarily grounded in 100% law. So I've realized this is for future discussion, so I don't want to go off the rails, but.
Yeah, we'll definitely 100% that's going to be a major issue of the next year. There's no question. Viana?
Hi, yes, Viana, Art History and Archaeology. Just briefly, I had a question about the assembly schedule for the upcoming year. I noticed it has our first meeting as being in September and then going all the way through June of the following year. Maybe I misunderstood this. I thought that with all the changes to the Constitution, we had changed our meeting year to be August through May. So I'm just a little bit confused about this new schedule, if someone could clarify.
Do we have anyone on who helped put together the new schedule? Because normally that was
new schedule. Where was it posted or where was it sent?
It was in one of Ashley's emails.
But yes, per our Constitution, that is not allowed. We need to start in August and we run through May. So good catch, Viana.
Yes, historically, the schedule has been set by the incoming Vice President of Legislative Affairs. So we shall investigate that, but that is an excellent catch. I'm sure Annie has.
Speak on this, Erica.
Okay.
So I helped. I got an email from Edie and Annie. I think it was mainly Edie saying like, "Hey, can you make up a flyer for this?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'll make it." I can't remember. This was like back maybe like in April or so.
It was in April, yeah.
Yeah, so we put it together, but that's about it on my part. So I just thought I can forward that email thread, but that was about it. It was like Edie, Annie, and I.
Okay, so if it's April, that's pre new Constitution, so we'll probably have to make some changes, but that is an excellent catch, and we will look at it. Laura.
Laura McBride, Chemistry. Speaking about the schedule, I see that it has like rooms and stuff on it. So I'm assuming that if the university continues the social distancing guidelines, that we will not be able to meet in person because we'd have way too many people.
Right. So I think the main thrust of our meetings will likely be online. It's possible that we will have some people in person in some sort of capacity, depending on what the university eventually decides their actual rules are for who's allowed on campus and who is not. When those are finalized, we'll have to make a final decision. But my strong preference, given that my department has decided that none of us are going back to campus, would be to continue to meet online. But yes, I think that if this was put together in April, that's probably a reason why there are rooms listed when we may not need a physical meeting space.
All right, thank you.
All right, any other representatives forums issues before we move into executive session, or motion to move into executive session, and we'll see what happens.
Motion to move into executive session.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
It is seconded. Are there any objections to moving into executive session to discuss the resolution which Yehuda said the number of, but I don't remember?
GSG A37R06.
A37R06. Any objections? Seeing none, we will now move into executive session. What this means is that we need to stop streaming and recording, and we need everyone who is not a current member of this GSG